So narcissism, abuse, gaslighting, and family structures. What I was saying is, if you haven't checked it out, check it out. I have a video I did on love is not narcissistic, something like that. If you go to my Mark Tacey's website and check out the topics page, go to the love page. There's more on that. I think narcissism is a title that I think is helpful. It's a term that is very, very helpful. I do think people can overuse it, call everyone narcissistic. Oh, that person's narcissistic. That person's narcissistic. But I don't want it to steal from what it identifies. And I think narcissism is actually very biblical if you break down what it is. So I do plan on talking about what does that word look like from a biblical standpoint. I want to break that down more and more. I want to talk about narcissism in the church and in our families and so forth. So anyways, with that said, let me get into the question here. I'm curious about narcissistic abuse and emotional gaslighting in family structures, specifically growing up with a sibling that may be trending narcissistic. So you got like a brother or sister that you see narcissistic tendencies in. I hate that I could even think these things about my family, and I hate to misuse the words abuse and narcissism. I'm with you, but we got to admit it's there. We got to admit it's that when it's there, we have to see for what it is. You know, the lack of empathy, the gaslighting, the highly constructed image that a narcissist creates. And there's more characteristics you can understand and look up for yourself. But I'm desperate to understand what role sibling abuse and gaslighting might have in my lack of self-esteem, 5+ year chronic depression, and the increasing number of panic and anxiety attacks as I get older. Well, most of the issues go back to your parents. Siblings certainly feed into that, but it really starts with mom and dad. And then siblings just add on to the dysfunction because a sibling can carry on. It's very, common that narcissists can breed narcissists. And so you may have your other siblings replicating the patterns of your dad or your mom. And so when families, in all of our families, we come from brokenness, right? There are some that replicate the brokenness and defend it. You'll notice this. And then there's those that go, I want healing. And they can tend to be seen as black sheep. They can tend to be seen in a way where there's pushback. There is you're kind of cast away. Why? Because there's resistance. The sin and the demons in the family don't want to go away. They want to stay. And so you go, well, I want to be healthy, right? And so we go into a lot of this with the thought of, I want healing. Why wouldn't my family want healing? Like I remember when I was first discovering heart healing and being healed in the Father's love, I started telling my parents, started telling my relatives, wouldn't everybody want this, right? And then I realized that it means people have to deal with their brokenness. They have to deal with their sinful patterns and how they treated each other, and they have to heal relationally. And so for many, they just push back. They're not interested in healing. And we have to learn that pretty quick, that when you see that resistance rise up. And so you're probably going to have to learn boundaries like never before. And there's this thing that happens with narcissism. It takes time to recognize that's what's going on. Then you feel guilty. You feel guilty for even saying your parents are narcissistic or one parent was narcissistic. If you have one parent that's narcissistic, the other spouse is usually codependent to the narc. When I say narc, I don't mean an undercover police officer in drug use. When I say narc, I mean a narcissist. But anyways, so in the process of healing, we have to recognize that we'll have guilt rise up, and we feel bad. Oh, he's narcissistic, but if he was loved better, and then Christians we have a big battle with honor your father and mother, and we often equate that into that means that we should placate to their sinful patterns, or that we should call evil good, and we become codependent out of guilt. So healing from codependency and narcissism involves learning that guilt is not love. feeling bad for people is not love. He wasn't moved with compassion because he felt bad. He was moved with compassion out of love. And there are times where love speaks firmly. Love has boundaries, and Jesus had that. And that's why sometimes we get confused about Jesus. We're like, he's loving, right? But there's some times where, because we're confused about love, we've confused love with guilt. We confuse it with, I feel bad. And you never see Jesus going, I feel bad. He never operated that way. So that gives us a picture. Love is very compassionate, very gracious, very patient, very kind. But there is also where love doesn't get run over by the workings of narcissism. And narcissism is not someone loving themselves. That's a mistake people make. I hear people say, we got this generation talking about loving themselves. It's a bunch of narcissism. No, narcissists do not love themselves. Narcissists keep staring at themselves because they are so absent of being able to receive love and love themselves. They're filled with so much shame, and they're filled with so much emptiness. So they put on this highly orchestrated front that they want to look good. So they're either the biggest victor or the biggest victim, and they want to stay in that, keep that, and keep. And whenever that image, so a narcissist parent, whenever that image that I wasn't a perfect parent gets touched, shame reacts, and they will either go super pity, oh, you don't love me, you don't love me, and or they go into anger, and you get the wrath, the kickback, right? So with that said, I wouldn't necessarily focus as much on the sibling as recognizing what you come from parentally. So you're talking about gaslighting might have affected my lack of self-esteem, 5-year chronic depression, and the increased numbers of panic attacks and anxiety attacks as I get older. Yeah, all of that can certainly come out of being raised in a narcissistic home. My dad displayed clear narcissistic abusive behaviors that left everyone in high anxiety. There you go, right there. That's going to take healing. And part of the healing of narcissism is learning how to recover your sense of reality of what's healthy, because gaslighting has been happening so much. Gaslighting is like sorcery, It's like, oh, if you had done this better, put a spell. It's that kind of thing. That's what narcissism does. It brainwashes you. It puts you in a hypnosis of perception. You say, my mother was loving but too busy to attune to me, the more emotionally sensitive and needy middle child. There's already plenty of discourse about narcissistic fathers and unattuned mothers. However, there's not much about narcissism in siblings or growing up in a family dynamic where there's a lot of emotional gaslighting as the norm from more than one source, including a sibling you experienced childhood with. It feels unfair to speculate that my older brother, he's 2 years older, who is a Christian, loves Christ, and was raised in trauma as I was, might have adopted narcissistic and abusive tendencies. Yeah, could very well happen, for sure. Could very, very well happen. From as early as I can remember, my personal feelings towards him were of distrust and subtle fear, and it has grown over time. So that should help you, the light bulbs turn on, of, okay, I was dealing with a narc. And that's why I felt distrust and didn't know where I was going to stand at any moment. How do I, in Christ's love, protect myself from my brother? With boundaries. You have to determine how much interaction with this person can I handle at this stage in my journey. Because when you're dealing with a narc, don't try to change him. Don't try to change him. Don't try to tell him. Don't try to confront him. The best way to handle a narcissist is when you see their behavior, it kind of floats through. It doesn't penetrate your state of mind, your feelings, your emotions, right? That's the ideal place. Most of us can't handle that, especially when it's a family member. It's too much. So you have to, at the stage you're at now, over time you might be able to, but for some people, they have to go dark for a season. Like I can't be around it. Can't be around it. And I'm not going to tell you where you need to hold that line. Now, in that time, if you put a boundary up and say, well, I'll say hi to you at Christmas, but I'm going to go do something else. I'm going to be by myself, or I'm going to be with other friends or whatever, right? Is you're going to struggle with guilt. You're going to feel bad. And the narc will make you feel bad. Where have you been? You don't say hi to your father anymore, right? That kind of stuff. Because that's part of the game. It's part of the game. The narc, it's all about me. It's not about you. And healthy parenting it's not about me. My child, it's about them in the moment and ministering to them, helping them, loving them, right? With narcs, everything turns back to them. Either I'm amazing, look at what I've done, or I'm the biggest martyr and victim, right? And that happens in a lot of, cultures in different ways, depending on where you come from, right? I could talk to you about Norwegian guilt. I could talk to you about Puerto Rican guilt. Woo, man. They have flavors of their own. I could get into that, but let me stick with your question. So it's boundaries, and you have to be kind to yourself and realize, what can I handle right now? I want to love my brother, but the anxiety I feel around him and the pain he's caused me make me want to stay away. I think it's about boundaries, taking into consideration where you're at right now, and throughout the whole process, whether you have medium boundaries, heavy boundaries, or you have to go no contact, right? Here's where being a Christian comes into play. Ready? Okay. Sorry, hold on.
Here's where being a good Christian comes into play.
In that sense, when it comes to being a believer, is we always want to remain open to reasonability. So if I have an open door for somebody in my family or in broken relationships, I never want to have the door slammed where I'm never, ever, ever open to a reasonable conversation. And I think that's where we as believers, it's important that we be reasonable, right? That's like, it's not just you're all evil and I'm all good and that's that, and you need to get your act together. No, I need to grow too, and I recognize that. But right now, here's the boundary I need to be able to grow and heal. If you're willing to meet, and I've helped others with this, I've had to walk through this myself. It's like a negotiation. It says, hey, if you're willing to be respectful in this way, I'm all in. It's great. But if not, if we're gonna play these games, no, can't do that, right? So back to what you're sharing here. If I can find my way, and I'm checking the sound, checking. However, how do I in Christ's love? Okay, I want to love my brother, but the anxiety I feel around and pain has caused me to stay away. I feel setting up boundaries is turning my back on him. That's black and white. You can set up boundaries and you see him once in a while, or you text him every now and then. But wherever you're hanging out with him right now, you may need to bring it down, because being around him probably spins you out. So you probably leave when you interact with narcs and you leave their presence, you find yourself spinning about stuff. You might be spinning about anger. You might be spinning out about anxiety. A lot of what you spin out about is self stuff. You beat yourself up. And a lot of times we don't know, like, what's going on? Why is it when I went to Thanksgiving that, like, I feel like the whole next day, I went to Black Friday to go shopping and I thought it was kind of a fun day and I feel like I'm just spinning all over the place because you were hanging out with your dad on Thanksgiving. And he's very, very broken, and he sprays the can of brokenness, spray paint, So you walk away with that. Yuck. I feel grief for the pain he endured as a child, the pain he caused me, and the lack of healthy relationships we had growing up. Okay, that's good to have empathy of that, but don't let that go where it becomes your burden. Your brother's brokenness is not your burden. Just let that sit for a second. Your brother's brokenness. 'Cause I know for a lot of Christians that brings up crickets, right? Your brother's brokenness is not your burden to carry. You can have empathy. And if he ever wants to have reasonable conversations, but you see him replicating the demons of the family, and with that, he can probably defend them, right? So you need to be released of that, released of the guilt of that. Anyways, I think I made that point. I don't know what to do for him, but I also don't know what to do for me. All you can control is your journey, is where you're headed, where you're pointing your compass. How does one heal from this, you said? When the entire family gaslights, abuses, or ignores with different degrees of intention, awareness, or innocence during formative years, can you ever heal and gain a whole sense of self? Yes, you can. You can gain a greater sense of health, and you can help a lot of people, because narcissism is the plague. It's one of the plagues we're under. You know, there's so much of a manifestation of narcissism due to parental neglect. And the next stage is going to be the plague of histrionic kind of behavior, which that's kind of the next. You can look that up and what that looks like. These are just terms to just help us quickly identify layers of patterns, right? So what you just shared creates a lot of abuse. And so it's going to be important to recover reality, working through guilt, working through making time for yourself to heal. And I appreciate recovery groups emphasize this a lot, like AA or ACA, is just focus on yourself. When I mean that, I don't mean like in a selfish way. Just focus on your journey, because we get lost in like, we want our family to be better. It distracts us from what we're needing healing from.